So, welcome to Talking Timber with me, Mike Jeffrey.
And Keith Fryer.
And now we come to one of our Talking Timber guest slots where we chat with representatives of the timber and associated trades about current issues and developments, some of the market challenges, but also the opportunities and potential for the wood sector.
Yeah, today our guest is David Venables. David's European Director of the American Hardwood Export Council, or I think the acronym is pronounced AHEC. The US forest is one of the biggest hardwood resources in the world. The country is the biggest hardwood supplier in the global marketplace. As well as its size and abundance, the US forest is also impressive in terms of diversity. It provides a wide range of species suited to multiple applications across construction and also on manufacturing.
Yeah, and AHEC's role is to promote US hardwoods across the world, and that's promote in the wider sense. It supports hugely ambitious showcase projects to demonstrate the technical and aesthetic possibilities of US timber, US hardwoods. It facilitates development of new ways to use and process the material to widen its end-use possibilities. It works with leading architects, designers, engineers and manufacturers to further push the end-use boundaries. And it also reaches out to students, the specifiers and end users of the future. It's also supported development of tools and studies to verify the environmental performance of the American hardwood sector. And it has other projects underway to raise the profile and underline the value of US hardwood still further.
Yeah. So, David, after that great big build-up, if we can start with the US hardwood forest, critically, in our eyes, or ever more environmentally aware times, it's billed as one of the most sustainable and transparent, legally managed in the world. What's the basis of that statement?
Well, hello. I'm delighted that it's recognised in that way, and I think that's really important. And it's taken a lot of effort to get that assurance out there. What's the basis? I think the short answer is because it exists.
Right.
It's an enormous forest reserve that's there. Because what we have to remember is 150 to 200 years ago, it was wiped out.
Right.
Probably one of the largest deforestation events that probably has ever taken place.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's there and it's come back is due to a whole multitude of factors. And that proves today its sustainability. And of course, we know this because it's backed up by a lot of data. When the American communities realised in the early 20th century what they'd done, really, in building America, using all that timber for mining, for building towns, cities, chemical industries, taking all the bark. Quite often the timber was left to rot. And of course, during that heyday, the timber barons of Pennsylvania and elsewhere were some of the richest people in America at the time. So it's been an extraordinary sort of transition.
It's literally a roller coaster journey, isn't it?
Oh, very much so. And I think at the centre of it has been the fact that communities came together with government support, starting in the 1920s and just gathering momentum over decades, both at national and at state level, realising that they had to work to reforest and allow space and time for those trees to grow back because they were part of the culture, they were a source of food, an important source of materials. Now, of course, we understand their role in terms of carbon capture and much bigger issues. But, at the time, it was, a local, a practical thing. They got no trees left. And water courses were, a lot of the legal framework that came into place was to protect, the quality of water supply, habitats, biodiversity, all these other issues were at play as well, not just getting their trees back for timber.
Yeah, Thanks. Thank you very much.
And AHEC has also developed these tools which we referred to earlier to verify the environmental credentials of US hardwood and the US hardwood forest, but also of the environmental profile of trade in US hardwoods. I'm thinking in particular about the AHEC's life cycle assessment tool and US hardwood environmental profile documentation. Can you tell us a bit about those and what you see as their significance?
Well, of course, they're hugely significant, not just for us, but for, all manufacturing industries, construction industries, because we have to be much more aware of the impact of the materials we use. And, to be honest, a lot of this work, it is beginning to happen now, perhaps not in product design as quickly as in building and construction, but it's decades too late, really.
Right.
Like many of our responses, to the environmental crisis, we're coming at this quite late. But if we don't know, all the materials and things that we have around us, what it takes to consume them and the impact of those materials, we're never going to be able to make informed choices or think more carefully about whether we need stuff. And if we do, what stuff do we need? And, I think for us, we carried out our work over 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
Really, I think to establish, we already understood that you use timber quite often in a natural context, as a natural material. It's not being reworked, it's used in quite a natural form.
Yeah.
And of course, its ability to store carbon was understood. So we then wanted to find out, what in fact are the impacts, our selection harvesting that goes on in natural hardwood forests that naturally regenerate, which ours do.
Yeah.
It's quite low intensity. There's not a lot of pesticides. There's not a lot of mechanical harvesting.
Yes.
There is some, and we wanted to understand that was quite small. We then looked at the production of the raw material itself, and of course then understood one of the highest impacts was the drying of the timber, because hardwood takes longer to dry. But then I think finally the most important thing, the question we were being asked in Europe, what and elsewhere, why should we use your hardwoods? We've got our own, or why do we bring them from the other side of the world? And when we started to do an analysis, for example, of hardwood coming to the UK from Ukraine or Croatia by road, it had a much higher carbon footprint than container shipping containers of American hardwood from Virginia or Pennsylvania through eastern ports. And I think that began to change the mind of the marketplace.
I was going to just ask, I know that AHEC has put a lot of focus in recent years, and it's been a trend in the European market to buy and use a narrower range of US hardwoods, white oak, tulip wood, walnut, ash. You advocate to the market to try and use a wider selection from that diversity of species. Why is that important to you? It's about more than selling hardwood, isn't it?
Far more in a sense. But obviously, if we succeed, our industry does better. To be honest, they could. Production capacity has dropped actually in recent years, as your listeners will probably be well aware. They could increase production quite significantly and still easily be sustainable. I mean, you could double or triple the volumes, and we are still one of the largest hardwood exporter. So that puts it into context. And where we've got to be using more wood, we need to start putting fashion on the back burner and saying, right, where in the world have we got our raw materials, our wood materials? And I'm not just talking American hardwoods, we've got to think the same about European wood supplies, about softwood supplies for construction. Where is it positive? Where is it being replanted? Where is it naturally growing? And allow time and space and hopefully politics to reforest those areas that we've deforested. And of course, we need an agricultural a much better global agricultural vision in order to be able to, to do that. So I think when it comes to our particular resource, mortality is increasing dramatically. It won't stay sustainable. It'll start to die if we don't actually utilise that enormous growth. We talk about it. I mean, in the last decade alone, we have had every year a two to one in terms of growth in the forest of actual hardwood compared to the volume that's been harvested over the last decade.
Wow.
So, we've got to keep utilising that growth. Otherwise, what's happening at the moment, mortality is increasing, and then that carbon is released back into the atmosphere, and you've lost a source of material. And we have a narrow vision oak in terms of products and interiors. Particularly the light white oaks. You've got the same problem in Europe. A lot of unused beech in the European forests, and then you look at construction, where that growth in mass timber construction is being driven basically around one species, spruce. So we've got to change it.
Yeah. And
I would also add, actually, if I could, that it's about consumer choice as well. We're narrowing our consumer choice as well as affecting the sustainabilities of our resources. And that we should think about as well. If you don't put it in the shop window, it's not going to be asked for.
Yeah. And also, I mean, if we stick to using the main, the main commercial species as they are now, I mean, you're actually long term you're risking putting them under supply stress, aren't you? If you don't, whereas there could be other options out there which could supplement these timbers.
Mike, it's happening already, and we know that. We've looked at within our own white oak resource. I mean, your listeners will be well aware of the current dynamics around white oak. It's still half of all the American hardwoods, the lumber certainly that comes into the UK. And they'll know that dynamic, and that's because the rest of the world wants it. The US consumer now sees it as a fashion item as well, and of course you've got the pressure from the barrel stave industries for the huge growth in liquor and wine that utilises that particular type of oak. So yes, we've seen it firsthand. Yeah,
and one species you've particularly highlighted in your communications and promotion activities is US red oak, which in Europe in recent times has been quite significantly overshadowed and outsold by US white oak. So why have you focused on red oak in particular in recent times?
Oh, well, there's a number of reasons. One, just to follow on what I was saying, is because you can't make barrels out of it. Right. They leak. It's one oak, or groups of oak, I should say, because the US is made up not just of single botanical species, but actually groups of species that are grouped together. And the red oak grouping, they're porous. They don't have tyloses. Those timber experts listening will know what I mean. Those platforms across the vessels that stop the water flowing. And so you can blow through a piece of red oak. It's often, rather than colour, the best way. I wouldn't recommend sucking, by the way. It doesn't taste very nice. But,
no, definitely not.
Of course, the main, aside from that, I mean, that's the current pressure that we're under, and there is a more stable supply of oak, but it's volume, actually, because it's 1/5 of all those hardwood trees. Every state has it. I think, bar a couple, almost every single sawmill I know produces it. In some quantity or another, so it's vastly available. It will solve all sorts of problems about fixed widths, sizes, tailoring, colour grades, whatever you want. And we're already beginning to prove in Europe that once we've established that it's a great performer.
Yeah, I was going to ask on that, David. As we understand the latest trade statistics, as showing red oak imports increasing in the UK and other European countries. Is that encouraging to you? Do you think red oak has got a sort of a growth availability in the market in the future?
Keith, it has to be encouraging for me because it's been my middle name
I know.
for the last 20 years. And timber trades all over Europe. I've been accused of flogging dead horses and going on and on and on about red oak. So, of course, it's encouraging. I would point out, I mean, it's now, in terms of what Europe's consuming, us and the EU markets, it's now the third most important timber behind tulip wood and white oak. Yeah. So that's changed dramatically. I have to be honest, in the UK, that growth has not been strong as I think it should be. And I know there are great examples where manufacturers and also developers are beginning to make the decision, not just because it's might be more affordable, but because it's a sustainable choice. But that's not extrapolating into a large volume yet. And yet we've seen Scandinavian countries take it up more, probably for flooring. We've seen the big industries in Italy and Spain use more of it. And I think what's encouraging is it's not really dented our white oak consumption. So these are new applications. You know, it's becoming the new ash in some cases as an affordable utility hardwood that you can do many things with.
Yeah, and you have got examples of UK makers, furniture manufacturers who have adopted it and really like it, haven't you? I mean, there are examples out there.
Oh, very much so. I mean, you know, Bloomberg's whole headquarters in London, okay, it was driven by an American organisation, but, you know, it was a UK-based architect, and that same architect has been developing, interior office ranges in American red oak. We increasingly hearing from importers. I think most of the main importers I know, large and small, now have some red oak in stock. Well, 5 years ago, that certainly wouldn't have been the case. So they're ready. We're certainly changing the dial and influencing the designers and architects. And we've just done that with a big project in central London for the Design Festival, looking at it as a glulam construction material. So we hope it'll all come together and the UK will catch up a bit. And I think the next year or two it will be, one to watch, definitely.
Yeah, good. And referring to what you just said, I mean, AHEC has supported and marketed and supported technical development for use of US hardwoods in thermally treated form and also in, as you referred to then, mass or engineered timber products such as glulam and CLT, where layers or lamellas of timber are laminated together, particularly for use in construction. And as you said, this London Design Festival project, VERT, was in glue laminated red oak. I mean, how important do you see that work and to take US hardwoods into other applications effectively?
Oh, I mean, I think it's vital for the whole wood sector, to be honest. Wow. You know, when I first started doing this job and working with the American industry, and I'd come out of the hardwood industry in the UK. But I'm a wood scientist. I go back to what wood materials can do. That's what I was taught. That's what I learned. And initially, their sort of idea of growth was finding a new market. You know, where's the next China? Where's the next, but actually the markets are quite often not geographical boundaries. They are new possibilities, new applications. I mean, we've lost a lot. There's a lot less solid timber used than when I first came into the industry. Other materials, veneered materials, man-made materials, we know that competition of non-wood materials. So it's really important to find other applications. Well, hardwood never and still doesn't really have a big bite into the construction. This massive potential of growth of, mass timber construction. And it should do. You've got high performance materials. And of course, when architects take the lead, engineers, as soon as they find out about these things, they go, wow, that's what we've been looking for. We want something where, not for every application, where we can make stronger, more sophisticated elements as part of, the whole that we're trying to, the holistic approach we're trying to do with timber building.
Yeah, and in terms of construction with the hardwood, it's got very good strength to weight, and so you can actually do more with less timber in a structural sense.
Yeah, and I think aesthetically, you've got to remember architects and to a large extent engineers as well. They're driven aesthetically as well as practically, so they want something that looks good. And there is room for, an affordable room for, if you take the whole cost of a building, for some other options. And again, I go back to that point of choice. If we don't lay out in front of architects and engineers all the possibilities. We came across tulip wood sort of by accident, working a relationship with the engineers Arab, and did some testing, 20 years ago now, and discovered that of anywhere in the world, it's probably got the highest strength to weight ratio of any timber. So you tuck that away, and then you suddenly realise, wow, when it comes to things like glulam or CLT, or now it's taken a while for it to resonate with industries, but I think we're already seeing in the US the beginnings of CLT manufacturing in hardwood, because they've got the resource on their doorstep. So these things are hugely important, from a global perspective, because they don't just further our resource and our industry, but they're also providing more solutions to the people who need the materials.
Thank you for that, David. I've got a sort of a question, but with a preliminary one in front of it. If we take the timber industry per se, you individually, but also the AHEC organisation corporately, has done an enormous amount to promote the use of American hardwoods. You've obviously don't do that purely, as a charitable sort of thing. It's a commercially driven exercise. Could I just start by asking, in terms of timber promotion for timber all across Europe and the UK, is the type of work you personally do the only way forwards to get us to use more wood? In other words, strong timber promotion?
I think it is essential. I've always believed it's essential, and it's paining me to some degree that looking at across Europe, that we haven't done enough of that. As a group, but also as individual countries. I think I would also not be out of turn by saying some of the difficulties our own industry in the US have at the moment is because they haven't focused enough on promotion in their own market. They took it for granted.
That's interesting.
We knew the transitions that were going to happen because we saw them happen in Europe, and believe you me, they'll start to happen in places like Asia as well. The move to higher grades, the move to non-wood material substitutes. So is from the UK and India and some of the other parts of the world, but certainly for me, for Europe, I've always said there's huge potential. We have barely, even this reduced market that we've got barely 10% of it. Europe will always need to import hardwoods. It will never be self-sufficient in that sense. Way. And the UK certainly isn't. So, if we can think differently along the lines of some of the things that we've been discussing, then yes, I think there's huge potential here, and we'll keep doing what we're doing and chipping away. And yes, the red oak's working for me, but sadly, a message out to all your listeners: don't forget the maple and cherry. They're brilliant timbers, and they've got forgotten. So that's my little advert at the end.
Quite right. No, this is your chance to get those messages out there. No, we're right behind you. We're right behind you.
But US Hardwoods has got this multiplicity of positive stories, hasn't it? It's got the sustainability. You've now got growing awareness of the need to use more bio-based materials because of the carbon benefits. And you've got the sustainability story for US Hardwoods as well. So really, you've got you've got a very strong story to tell overall.
Yes, and I know, but you've got to position that. The sustainability is, our industry want to make sure they've got a future.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't worry about the trees. I worry more about the health of the industry. I mean, to run a sawmill in today's environment with all the investment that's needed to produce even just the raw material before anyone starts making something. I think our market doesn't realise, or markets don't realise. And then we've spent the last couple of years, and I've been lucky to be part of this, at making a documentary. And shines a light on these remarkable forests and how they regenerated, but also, on some of the industry itself. And I think, we've got to keep doing that. We've got to keep educating and trying to connect those decision makers to them and to have a better understanding of the material and how it's grown and where it comes from, because they'll make better decisions that way. We're getting there, but slowly.
Yeah. Thanks, David. That's
my pleasure.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, and it might sound a little bit sort of strange, but honestly, on behalf of the industry, thank you to you and AHEC for what you've been doing over so many years, because that consistency of message has been like a drumbeat, really, where other parts of the industry have been like on-off switches. You've just kept going, thumping away. I mean, the Wood Awards, you've made that your heartland. You've done so much for the sector, and it's been a crucial part of what we've done to promote the use of wood in all its forms. So, it's great to have you on and have you telling us more about what you do.
Yeah. And
thank you for your very kind words.
No, it's a pleasure.
Team effort.
It is.
An industry that's totally committed, which also helps. And as I say, we get the funding, and I quite often think I've got one of the best jobs in the world. So I'm very lucky.
So, excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, David. And if any of our Talking Timber listeners have any comments or questions about what you've heard today from David, then please get in contact with us via talkingtimber.co.uk. And if there are questions, I'm sure we can pass them on to David. Perhaps, come back on Talking Timber and answer any other kind of queries or comments that we get.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to have you back on board.
I'd be delighted, Keith and Mike, to do that, because as you've probably gathered, I can talk timber all day long.
That's exactly what we want.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, David.
Thanks very much.
You take care.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.